What if I told you that the greatest obstacle you face is not the difficulty itself, but the way you approach it? That the reason you keep hitting walls and exhausting yourself is because you are trying to break through barriers that water would simply flow around? That the secret to overcoming everything that blocks your path has been hiding in plain sight every time you watch a river move through the landscape? I know this seems impossible when you have been taught your entire life that strength means force, that winning requires pushing harder, that obstacles must be conquered through aggressive determination and sheer willpower. But I am here, an old Taoist monk who has spent decades sitting beside streams watching water accomplish the impossible without ever appearing to struggle, to share with you the most profound teaching in all of Taoist wisdom. A truth so simple that most people overlook it entirely while searching for complex solutions to problems that water solves effortlessly every moment of every day. This is not a mental trick or a strategy to memorize and apply when convenient. This is the natural law that governs all of existence, the same principle that allows water to carve the Grand Canyon, to shape coastlines, to wear away mountains, all while remaining the softest substance on earth. Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching that nothing under heaven is softer or more yielding than water, yet for attacking the hard and strong nothing surpasses it, because the soft overcomes the hard and the gentle overcomes the rigid. And everyone under heaven knows this truth, but almost no one puts it into practice. Right now, I invite you to begin your transformation from rigid stone to flowing water by leaving a simple phrase in the comments below, a declaration that opens you to the ancient way. I flow like water around all obstacles. Write these words not as empty affirmation, but as sacred commitment to yourself that you are ready to stop breaking yourself against the walls of life and instead learn to move like water, adapting without losing your essence, flowing without losing your direction, yielding without losing your power. Let me share something I have observed in my many years sitting with people who come to the monastery carrying burdens so heavy their shoulders curve forward and their eyes have forgotten how to see joy. They tell me about the obstacles blocking their path, the difficult people who will not change, the situations that seem impossible to resolve, the goals that appear forever out of reach no matter how hard they try. And I watch as they describe their approach to these difficulties, which is always some variation of pushing harder, trying to force a breakthrough, attempting to make reality bend to their will through sheer determination and exhausting effort. They are like someone trying to force their fist through a stone wall, and they are shocked and frustrated when the wall remains standing while their hand is broken and bleeding. This is what happens when you forget the way of water, when you allow the modern world to convince you that rigidity is strength and that yielding is weakness. Watch what happens in your own life when you encounter obstacles. Your jaw clenches, your shoulders tense, your mind begins generating strategies for attack, for overcoming, for winning the battle against whatever stands in your way. You treat every difficulty as an enemy to be defeated, and you bring to it the energy of war, of force, of aggressive determination. But the more you push, the more resistance you encounter. The more you try to control, the more out of control everything becomes. The harder you grip, the more slips through your fingers like sand. This is the fundamental problem with the approach you have been taught. It creates the very resistance it tries to overcome. When you push against life with rigidity and force, life pushes back with equal rigidity and force, and you find yourself trapped in an exhausting stalemate where nothing moves forward, and you are slowly crushed between opposing pressures of your own creation. The Taoists call this going against the grain of the Tao, fighting the natural flow of reality, and it is the source of most human suffering. But there is another way, an ancient way that water has been demonstrating since before humans evolved the capacity to struggle against what is, was as. In ancient China, the sage Lao Tzu spent his life observing how nature accomplishes everything without ever appearing to struggle, and of all the teachers he found in the natural world, water emerged as the supreme master of overcoming obstacles through apparent weakness. He watched rivers flowing from mountains to sea and noticed that water never fights the rocks that block its path. When water encounters a boulder, it does not try to push through it or break it down through aggressive force. Instead, water simply flows around it, taking the path of least resistance, moving to the lowest place, the place that no one else wants, the place that seems like defeat to the proud ego that always wants to be on top and in control. But watch what happens over time. The boulder that seems so solid and permanent, the obstacle that appeared insurmountable, slowly begins to change. The constant gentle presence of water flowing around it, touching it with soft persistence day after day, year after year, begins to wear away the stone. the sharp edges become smooth. The immovable rock becomes smaller. Eventually, given enough time, the boulder becomes sand and the water carries it away to the sea, and the obstacle has not been conquered but transformed, dissolved, made into something that no longer blocks but flows. This is the teaching hidden in plain sight, that the softest substance overcomes the hardest substance not through force but through persistent, gentle presence, not through aggressive attack but through patient adaptation. Lao Tzu also noticed that water always seeks the lowest place, flowing downward, taking positions that the human ego rejects as beneath dignity or status. But this humility, this willingness to be low, is precisely what gives water its power. By always flowing to the lowest place, water collects and gathers strength, and from the lowest place, water nourishes all life. Every plant and creature depends on water's willingness to descend, to serve without demanding recognition or reward. The ancient sage Xuan Tzu told a story that illuminates this teaching even more clearly. A man was watching someone dive into the base of a massive waterfall, a place where the currents were so violent and unpredictable that it seemed certain death for anyone caught in them. But the diver emerged safely downstream, and when asked how he survived such dangerous waters, he explained that he did not fight the current or try to impose his will on the chaos. Instead, he went with the water, sensing its movements, yielding when it pushed him down, rising when it lifted him up, cooperating with the forces rather than resisting them. And this harmony with what is rather than fighting for what should be is what allowed him to pass through unharmed. This is Wu Wei in action, effortless action, moving with the flow rather than against it, and it is available to you in every situation where you currently struggle. Come deeper into the understanding with me now, where the full power of water's teaching reveals itself in ways that can transform how you move through every aspect of your life. Water teaches us that there are many forms of strength, and the one our culture worships, rigid, unyielding force, is actually the weakest and most vulnerable form. Lao Tzu observed that when a person is born they are soft and flexible, but when they die they are hard and stiff. And the same is true for plants, which are tender and full of sap when alive but withered and dry when dead. And from this he concluded that rigidity is the companion of death while flexibility is the companion of life. The mighty oak tree that stands proud and refuses to bend is the first to break and fall in the storm, while the bamboo that yields and bends with every gust of wind survives the typhoon that destroys everything rigid around it. This is not weakness. This is the highest form of strength, the strength to remain alive and effective while everything rigid is broken and useless. Water embodies this flexible strength perfectly. It has no fixed shape, no rigid form that it clings to desperately. Pour water into a cup and it becomes the cup. Pour it into a vase and it becomes the vase. Freeze it and it becomes ice. Heat it and it becomes vapor. Water adapts to whatever container or condition it finds itself in, and this formlessness is not lack of identity but the ultimate identity, the capacity to be whatever the situation requires while never losing its essential nature as water. You are being invited to cultivate this same quality in yourself, not to become weak or passive, but to become so flexible that nothing can break you, so adaptable that no situation can defeat you, so fluid that every obstacle becomes just another shape to flow around. When you encounter a difficult person at work, instead of meeting their rigidity with your own rigidity, creating conflict and stalemate, you can be like water, flowing around their defenses, finding the natural opening that force would never discover, accomplishing your goals through adaptation rather than confrontation. When you face a problem that seems to have no solution, instead of battering yourself against it with the same approaches that have already failed, you can be like water that tries every possible path until it finds the one that opens, patient and persistent but never forcing. Now I want to guide you into the practical application of water's wisdom, the specific ways you can begin moving like water today in the situations where you currently struggle and exhaust yourself through rigid forcing. The first practice is developing what we call fluid awareness, which means observing each situation with the openness and adaptability of water rather than approaching with fixed ideas about how things should be or must be. When you encounter an obstacle, instead of immediately planning your attack, pause and simply observe. Ask yourself not how can I force my way through this, but rather where is the natural opening? Where is the path of least resistance? What is trying to emerge here if I stop imposing my will? Water does not decide in advance which way it will flow, it senses the landscape and responds to what actually is rather than fighting for what should be. You can cultivate this same receptive intelligence by practicing what we call Zuo Wang, sitting in stillness and emptying your mind of all the rigid ideas and fixed strategies that prevent you from seeing clearly. When the muddy water of your thinking settles into stillness, clarity emerges naturally and you can perceive openings and possibilities that the agitated mind never notices. The second practice is embracing the power of yielding, which means consciously choosing to flow around obstacles rather than through them, to give way rather than push, to descend rather than dominate. This feels counterintuitive to the ego that has been trained to see yielding as defeat, but watch what happens when you practice it. In a conflict, instead of defending your position with rigid determination, try softening, acknowledging what is true in the other person's perspective, finding the common ground rather than fighting over the differences. You will discover that this softness disarms aggression far more effectively than matching force with force, because there is nothing to push against. The resistance dissolves when met with flexibility. In pursuing goals, instead of forcing doors that remain closed despite your exhausting efforts, try releasing your grip and seeing which doors open naturally, trusting that the Tao is showing you the path that flows rather than the path that requires breaking through walls. This is not giving up or becoming passive. This is becoming strategic in the way water is strategic, finding the route that works rather than insisting on the route your ego has decided must work. As you begin practicing these water-like qualities of flexibility, humility, and fluid adaptation, you will start noticing profound changes in both your inner experience and your outer results. The first sign that you are learning water's way is a feeling of ease replacing the constant tension that has been your normal state. When you stop forcing and start flowing, your body relaxes at a fundamental level because you are no longer bracing against reality but cooperating with it. Your breathing deepens, your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, and in this physical softening, mental and emotional softening follows naturally. Problems that seemed overwhelming when you approached them with rigid force begin to reveal solutions when you approach them with water's flexibility. Conflicts that escalated when you met aggression with aggression begin to dissolve when you meet rigidity with suppleness. Opportunities that were invisible to your forcing mind become obvious to your flowing awareness. The second sign is that you begin accomplishing your goals more easily and quickly than when you were pushing hard, which seems paradoxical until you understand that water's way is actually more efficient than force. When you force, you waste enormous energy on resistance, on the friction between your will and reality's grain. But when you flow, you use only the energy needed to move with the current rather than against it, and you arrive at your destination refreshed rather than exhausted. The third sign is that people respond to you differently, with less defensiveness and more openness, because they sense that you are not trying to dominate or control them, but rather flowing with the natural movement of the situation. Water nourishes all things without trying to control them, and when you embody this quality, you become someone who brings life rather than conflict to every interaction. The transformation continues deepening as you make water's way not just an occasional practice, but your fundamental orientation to all of life's challenges and changes. You begin to understand what the ancient Taoists meant when they said that water benefits all things and does not compete, that because it does not compete, no one under heaven can contend with it. This is the great secret, that the moment you stop competing, stop trying to win, stop needing to be right or on top or in control, you become undefeatable, not because you are stronger than your opponents, but because you have no opponents, only situations to flow through. You also discover that water's teaching applies not just to external obstacles, but to internal ones. The rigid beliefs that have trapped you in suffering, fixed ideas about who you are and what is possible, the hardened patterns of thinking and reacting that create the same painful results over and over, all of these internal obstacles dissolve when met with water's flexible awareness. Instead of trying to force yourself to change through willpower and self-discipline, which is just more rigidity fighting rigidity, you simply allow yourself to become soft and fluid, observing your patterns with the gentle persistence of water touching stone, and gradually, naturally, the hardness wears away and new possibilities emerge. The ancient practice of living in harmony with the Tao becomes simply living like water, flowing with what is rather than fighting for what should be, adapting to circumstances while remaining true to your essential nature, yielding when yielding serves and acting when action serves. always with the fluid intelligence that senses the appropriate response rather than forcing predetermined solutions. As we come to the end of our time together, I want to leave you with the image that can serve as your constant reminder and guide. Picture water flowing through a rocky stream. The rocks represent all the obstacles in your life, the difficult people, the challenging situations, the goals that seem blocked, the changes you resist. Watch how water moves through this landscape. It does not announce its intentions or demand that the rocks move aside. It does not complain about the obstacles or waste energy wishing things were different. Water simply flows, finding every opening, filling every low place, moving around what cannot be moved through, wearing away gradually what cannot be avoided, always progressing toward the sea, never rushing but never stopping, soft enough to nourish all life, yet powerful enough to carve canyons, humble enough to seek the lowest place, yet essential enough that nothing survives without it. This is the teaching, this is the way, and it has been available since the first river flowed, and will remain available until the last ocean evaporates. Today I invite you to practice being like water in just one situation where you have been rigid and forcing. Feel the shift when you soften, when you stop pushing and start flowing, when you release the need to control and instead trust the natural movement of the Taoist. Notice what becomes possible in that flexibility that was impossible in rigidity. Return here and share your experience by leaving that phrase, "I flow like water around all obstacles." If this ancient teaching resonates with something in you that is exhausted from all the fighting and forcing, I invite you to continue walking this path with me by joining this channel. Together we will explore the way of water and mountains, and the profound power that comes not from hardness but from the willingness to be soft, not from force but from the intelligence to flow. Remember this always, in all of nature nothing is softer than water, yet nothing is better at overcoming the hard and strong. The stone stands rigid and proud but slowly becomes sand. The water flows humble and gentle but shapes entire continents. The sage does not fight obstacles but flows around them. The wise person does not force solutions but allows them to emerge from the natural unfolding. Be like water today, soft and yielding yet ultimately unstoppable, and discover that every obstacle you face is simply inviting you to remember the way you knew before the world taught you to be hard, the way of flowing rather than forcing, the way of adapting rather than resisting, the ancient way of water that overcomes all things by never competing with anything. Go now in peace, carrying this teaching like water carries everything it touches, gently and persistently toward the sea where all rivers return home. And trust that your softness is not weakness but the highest expression of strength. Your yielding is not defeat but the secret to victory that requires no battle. Your flowing is not aimless wandering but the most direct path to everywhere water needs to go. The Tao flows like water through all things, and you are not separate from this flow. You are the flow itself, temporarily forgetting and now beginning to remember, and in that remembering every obstacle becomes just another stone for water to caress, reshape, and eventually carry home to the eternal ocean.